Well, hello there everybody. I'm Brandon. This is my channel where I'm posting all of the paintings that I'm doing, some tutorials here, some time lapses there. So if you're new to it, check it out. Maybe consider subscribing. Been cranking out a lot of small canvas project work here lately, doing a lot of tutorials off of those. One that I just finished up, I haven't even signed it. I'm not even entirely sure I'm completely finished detailing it out, but I've done 99% of it anyway. If you want to paint along with this owl posted up here on this tree limb, let's get to it. Alright, I have a 6x8 canvas that I'm going to be working with here today on this particular owl project, and so you'll notice here that I've got a basic pencil sketch in of my owl, how I want him laid out, how I want him sitting there. This always helps me get colors in the right places and gets me an idea of where I'm headed with a project. So if that's going to help you out, I suggest taking a few minutes to sketch you out an owl. There's a variety of ways you can get it done, freehanding it, whatever you need to do. Get you a little sketch to start working with here, and we'll get started on the background. I'm going to be using a 3/4 inch wash brush to create just kind of a blurry, faded out background behind this owl that the owl itself will then pop against in the foreground. So I'm going to be starting with my wash brush and just a mixture of grays and tans and maybe a hint of blue in there in the background that I'm going to be working around here. So we're going to get started with that. I'm going to start here using some black and some white, make a nice gray mixture here. I'm going to add a little bit of the Phthalo Blue to it. And again, as always, here my paints and my brushes are listed down in the description if you need to have a look at those. And I'm going to basically come in here and just start dropping some color on the canvas to see what I get. And again, we're going to be doing a mixture of things going on back there with grays and tans mostly, nothing specific, and I'm just creating a very generic background with no detail in it. Just something that we can have that our owl will pop against. Now when I'm putting in a background, one thing I like to do is just touch my brush into the colors that I am using for the background without mixing them. So in this case I'm using, tans and browns and grays and blues and things. And don't mix the colors, just touch my brush into them. That way I get a streak kind of effect when I drag the brush across the canvas. So you can see these streaks that are in here of the different colors because I did not mix them. I just kind of touched the brush into them, put the brush on the canvas, and then just kind of pull it in a direction and streak that color out. When I do a background this way, it just makes things back there look a little out of focus, and you can't tell what they are. There's something back there, but we don't know what it is. Could be, trees, bushes, limbs, who knows what's back there. But the point is we can create that effect and keep our detail out of the background. That'll make our foreground image, which in this case will be the owl, nice and vibrant and sharp against our background that we were putting in. So that's how I create these backgrounds. Now obviously you can do whatever it is that makes you happy, but for me, I think that's where I'm going to start, and I want to go ahead and block in this limb that he's going to be standing on. I'm just going to use mostly black and brown here and put in the indication of a tree limb of some sort here that's coming up that this owl is perched on. Now I'm going to block in the owl himself, which the owl here that I'm going to be painting is mostly in the brown and kind of tan cream looking color variety in terms of his feathers. So I'm going to come in and just put the darkest colors in the darkest areas in terms of what I feel are the darkest values in each spot. So out here on this wing is mostly a dark brown. I'm going to come in here with a lot of brown with some black in it and just block this wing in. The majority of the body of this owl is more of a lighter, creamier color. So I'm going to go into a little bit of yellow ochre, a little bit of brown, some white. Let's see what that gets me. It's a little maybe too much yellow ochre for me there. That's a little better. So I'll put the rest of his body in with a bit of that value for now. Now I'm going to switch brushes to something a little smaller to get in there a little bit easier. I'm going to a little 1/2-inch angled brush now and try to clean up some of those lines a little bit. Come back into my brown for a minute and get in here to the tip of this wing. And then back into that creamier body color here. Now that creamier color is in some areas around the face. He's got some pieces of it that go around the eyes a little bit. We've got a little bit of an underwing on the back side here that's darker, so I'm going to drop some of that darker brown in over here. And then he's a lot darker through this area. Now around his face and eyes there, you've got some really dark stuff. His little beak that's in there is also pretty dark. We'll drop that in. And then their eyes obviously have that yellow to them, so I'm going to put some yellow in there to kind of give that indication. And he's got some white, or some lighter stuff around that face too. I'm going to come in and drop in a bit of a gray base to be where that white is that we can put over top of it, but we don't want to just paint white on a blank canvas there basically, so I'm going to kind of put in a gray base to where his white areas are here on either side of his beak, underneath his eyes, and then some areas that go up above his eyes. He's got a streak of white that goes kind of like up above, like some eyebrows maybe, some down here on the bottom of his face as well. Alright, so now I'm going to retire my 1/2 inch angled brush here and go into a little 1/8 inch angled brush to kind of finish that detailing in there. Come in here around these eyes and finish that up. We'll try to get a little bit of color in on these eyes to start out with. So he's got a big yellow ring that goes around the outer part. I'm going to put a big glob of yellow in here to start out with. And then basically let that big glob of yellow dry and then come back in and put the black pupil in the middle of it. We'll come back and refine the circular shape nature of these eyes, or however we're going to shape them anyway, after we've done the rest of our detailing work. But for now, just so we can have some color in place, we're going to do that and drop some black back in the middle of it. Now that I have my basic block-in layer here done, I'm going to slightly adjust my background colors around this owl, just so I've got a little bit more contrast between them and the owl itself. They're a little bit too close for my likings at the moment. So this is just me wanting to tweak them a little bit. If you're happy with what you've got going on, then stick with what you've got, but I'm going to gray mine out a little bit more since I have a little bit more tan going on in the bird. I'm going to bring in a little bit more white and black and create a little bit more of a gray background as opposed to having so much tan in my background. Alright, that's a little bit better. I think I can work with that. I got a little bit better contrast, so now I can continue working on my owl. I think I'm going to go ahead and finish dealing with my tree branch that he's sitting on first. I'm going to go back into a little 1/2 inch angled brush that I was working with earlier. Come back in here and clean up my overall shape a little bit since I went back over my background. So let's drop in mostly black and a little bit of raw umber in there here to get our basic shape. I'm going to go with some gray mix here. Let's add a little bit of white to our black here and gray things out a little bit. Maybe a touch of raw umber in with it as well. Come in on a first pass here and create a few interesting little, some kind of bark texture in here on top of that black, just to give us a starting point. Now I'm going to lighten things up a little bit more. I'm going to add a pinch of yellow ochre to it. Let's see what that gets me. Now I'm going to add some titanium white to it, lighten it up some more, and come in here and really start to define out some individual tree bark that's on this limb. Not looking for monotone full coverage here, just kind of dab the brush, turn it, tap it, twist it in there where you get some color to come off the brush that doesn't stay monotone or uniform. Now we'll add some weird little accent things to it, maybe with a touch of green, just a little bit of green, and a lot more white, some kind of like little moss or something that's out there growing on it. And see if we can touch in some of that color, basically dotting it in there with the end of the brush. Just go for a variety of textures and colors and create all sorts of interesting things in there on your limb to make it look realistic as possible, if that's what you're going for. I'm going for obviously a good sense of realism, or the best that I can achieve here anyway. Alright, I'm pretty happy with the way my limb is looking right now. I'm going to go ahead and get started on detailing out this owl. And this process here is just going to be a matter of layering in different shades of these colors here to create some feathered looking texture. So I think I'm going to start by cleaning up some of the edges a little bit. That tail down there needs to be redefined back out after I went through there and made some changes to my background. And I'm basically going to go into that shadowed creamier color that I had made there. A little bit of yellow ochre, a little bit of raw umber, a little bit of white. Add a touch of black to it. And come in here and define out a couple of individual feathers along this tail. Basically make some a little darker than others, to where they would appear to be overlapping in some areas and some shading the other ones out some. So I'll put a little touch of extra raw umber and a hint of black in there. Create a little bit of separation from some to the others. Now come in and brighten that mix up a little bit to work around the edges of where I just shaded some of that in, and highlight out some of the other feathers that might be catching a little more light. He's got a couple of these dark bands that run under here as well. That's a pretty good start for our tail. Now we can move in to start dealing with the body of that owl a little bit, and I'm going to continue to work with a little bit lighter shade of that creamier body color and just start working some brush strokes in a vertical fashion here with this angled brush to create a little bit of a feather texture in there. I darken up my mix a little bit with some raw umber on the sides so he's a little bit more shaded. And then a lot of his feathers have some like brownish red, some raw umber with a hint of red in there, highlight of some streaks that come through them as well. So I'm going to come back and start adding those indications in. Down towards these bottom feathers, these lines on this particular owl, they're almost straight lines. And then as you move up the body, those lines start to get a little broader, a little wider. We kind of have the opposite deal going on here on this wing. So the bulk of his wing is that darker brown, and then the highlights that it has coming on it are back to that lighter cream color. So we're basically going to reverse our process and come over here and add the lighter highlight back in on top. And again, down here towards the bottom, they're thinner lines. And as you move up, they get a little bit broader and wider. There's a little more of an orangey appearance to some of that down towards the bottom. I'm going to add a little yellow ochre in here and come down the edge of that wing. I'm going to add some of that yellow ochre into some of these other highlights in here towards the base, just to break up the monotony of our colors a little bit. Maybe put a hint of that in some of this feather along his chest as well. I'm going to try to define out some of these feathers along the tip a little bit just by drawing some separation between them, a little darker lines. Go into a little bit of raw umber, a hint of black, and see if we can't create a few divisions there among some of those feathers. We got a couple of really dark spots that extend out to the ends of these, and there's also a few kind of dark barred areas in the middle there. Alright, now we'll just continue to keep working up here towards the head. We'll break up some of this dark stuff in here. He's got some lighter, back to that creamier color that comes through a lot of this. Much smaller brush strokes in here. Then he has a pretty abrupt white almost line that comes right along in there, and also there on the top of his head. And then these feathers right in through here are also fairly white. Now I think I'm going to switch to a smaller brush to finish doing this detail work. I'm going to go to I've got a little 5/0 spotter brush here. It's just a little small thing with a fairly small tip to it that I can get in here a little closer and do some of this finishing detail work. These feathers around the face and eyes. As I've mentioned before on some of my other particularly wildlife bird paintings and things of this nature, it helps to have good reference source material so you can figure out what kind of colors you're trying to put where. So I am leaning on a reference photo here to know what this owl looks like. We need to finish kind of making his beak come to a little point right there and put some highlight out on it. Make a little shiny spot out on the edge. That's a little too bright. I need to gray that up a little bit. That's better. Finish cleaning up these eyes a little bit. And add just a tiny bit of highlight on the eyeball there, a little bit of a sheen to it, but not much. Now just finish some of these highlights of feathers around the face. Now I need to kind of finish out his feet down here. He's got a leg that kind of drops down onto this tree limb, one that's kind of tucked underneath there that you can't really make out too well maybe. A couple of really dark hook claws down in there. And then it's just a matter of making any last tweaks to this thing that you want to make it your ultimate finished product. But we've done the bulk of the work here at this point, so it's literally just a matter of a little highlight here, a little highlight there, a couple of lines here, a couple of lines there until you're happy with it. So I might keep playing around with this and tweaking on it a little bit, but just know that that's a pretty good finished product for right now. So I hope you've got something you're happy with. I might keep playing around with mine a little bit, but I don't know, I might just leave it as is. Either way, there is a fairly quick, simple little owl project. It's a pretty good end result. Hope you had fun painting along on this one. Until next time, happy painting, everybody.